Without money, it's difficult to build a successful business. Either it comes from your revenues or, it comes from investors. At different stages, there are different solutions, and that's fine. But you need someone who keeps an eye on those numbers.
Your second CEO tip is hire a great CFO. Why?
So I've seen that with a lot of startups. I think it's probably underestimated for a lot of businesses, and I see why. Because when you start a business, a venture, you need to focus on so many things. You need to raise capital potentially if you don't have your own sources for that or resources for that. You need to build a product. You need to sell the product. So there are so many things to focus on, and people tend to forget about how important it is to actually manage your cash flow, manage your cash, because that's the essence of your business. Unfortunately, I have to say, without money, it's difficult to build a successful business. Either it comes from your revenues or it comes from investors. At different stages, there are different solutions, and that's fine. But you need someone who keeps an eye on those numbers, and there's a firm plan in place, and there is a buffer. So if something goes wrong, and as currently we see, things can go wrong anytime, you are prepared for that as much as possible. And I think a CFO is also very helpful because they can take a lot of burdens off your shoulder. So it's not just about the numbers and the planning and running different scenarios, but it's also about investor relations. And there might be a separate person for that, but typically I think CFOs also handle that. And investors can be sometimes a little bit tricky with all their questions, and it requires a lot of time. But if you have a dedicated person for that, I think that's very helpful. And as a CEO, of course, there are times when you need to be present, when you need to talk to your investors, or if it's an M&A, of course you need to be there. But that's what I'm saying. It can save a lot of time for the CEO if you can rely on a CFO. And I think I see at least a pattern where people tend to underestimate that because they think first we need to focus on many other things, but that's how you can focus on those other things.
Absolutely. I can second that because many founders, they waste a lot of time in searching for money. Yeah. In a phase of their company, in a stage, in the early stage, where you should really be every day focused on the product market interface. So how the user uses it, how you can do it better, what else needs to be built. And with this idea, you can split responsibilities, and somebody is still taking care of the customers and not spending so much time on searching for money or counting money.
Do you want to make your sales more repeatable and reliable? Do you want to have less volatility and more growth in your revenue per month? At Strategy Sprints, we do only one thing: strategy in sprints. Strategy means more revenue through a better offer. Doing it in sprints means having more energy in your team every week. Check out if your ROI is as high as it is for most service-based and online businesses and startups we work with, which is over 100%. You can see yours in just 15 minutes by going to strategysprints.com/sales and completing our exercise to know what your ROI would be with our accelerator program. We are ready to sprint. Are you?
So, your third CEO tip: get up every day with your mindset on improving something.
Yes, so I have to admit I borrowed this from Sam Walton because I recently read his book. So he's the founder of Walmart in the US, and we all know that it grew to a huge business. And I thought that this, this thought is very, 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 very helpful because when you get up, and if you have that mindset that I need to improve something today, and you have that every day, whether it's for your customers, whether it's for your employees, whether it's for your product or yourself, I think even if these are incremental changes or incremental improvements, this is how you will kind of progress. and I think that's a very positive and progressive mindset for a CEO, and also for founders, or even for everyone, I think, because then you are already set to do something great that day again. And that's again going back to creating something or creating value that will also give you the reward by the end of the day, that today, I don't know, I made my employees happy because I did something for them, or I made my customers happy because we released an update for the product, or whatever it can be. But I think that mindset is very, very helpful.
2 books that inspire you personally.
Yes. So if it's okay, I will mention a podcast and or like an audio and a book as well. So the podcast that I like to mention is Associated by Francesca Bailio and Luis and Petra. So that's run by three women from the VC industry. And why I like to mention that is because I get a lot of questions how to get into VC. Oh, am I the right person if I don't have financial background? I only, founded a startup which was successful, or I only have a tech background, or the other way around. I'm a financial person, but I don't have the tech knowledge. Am I the right person for a VC to be hired? And I think that podcast helps you a lot to answer all those questions, because this is basically interviews with people with very different backgrounds, various backgrounds, and it shows you how everyone could get to that role which they were dreaming of, or sometimes they didn't even think about that, but somehow it just happened to them. So you can kind of follow those journeys through these 40-50 minute episodes, and you also get insight into different venture capital firms, corporate VCs, how they work, what their focus areas are, what they are looking for. So it's also useful for startups, but I also think it's very useful for people who are looking at getting into this industry. It's very inspiring, I found it, so I would recommend it to everyone.
Beautiful. What did you recently change your mind about?
Sorry, I don't know if I can mention a book as well.
Oh, sure.
Because and then I'm happy to answer the question. The book that I was thinking about, it's also something that I recently read, and it's called The Upstarts. And it's basically a book about Airbnb and Uber. And why I think it's a very prompt book as well is because these companies were also born in a meltdown of the global economy, so a very similar situation to nowadays. And I think it's fascinating how people didn't even think that was possible, that these businesses would grow and become very dominant businesses, because like who would sleep in someone else's bed, or who would get into someone else's car. So those disrupt.
You cannot create a business if you don't own the room. How should that be possible? That's not a business.
Right. So they came up with a completely different business model, and in the middle of a crisis. So that's why, and then you also see, all the hurdles, all the difficulties, the regulatory challenges, the ethical questions, and you also see little failures or bigger failures, but the successes as well. So I think if you want to learn about entrepreneurship and what it means, I think that's a book that you should probably read, because you can learn a lot from it, and then you have your own takeaways, whether you like them or not, or you like it or not. But I think it's just the journey again, what matters.
Absolutely.
We all know that working in sprints is better, but how do we know what to work on? You're in luck, because we have a 15-minute exercise that will give you complete clarity on where to take your project next. Go to strategysprints.com/sales to complete our short exercise and meet one-on-one with an expert sprint coach to identify your number one bottleneck.